The morning fog blanketed Astoria, Oregon on that cold day in 1993, clinging to the cliffs like a thick gray curtain. The Pacific roared below, its waves crashing violently against the rocks as if trying to claw their way inland. The sea was angry, its voice loud and insistent, as though it tried to warn those ashore of something long buried and now disturbed. The town was just waking, the fishermen out checking their traps, the docks creaking under the weight of the morning's first hauls. Seagulls circled, their cries piercing the stillness, as if warning of the dark discovery about to break the day. The narrow streets of Astoria were empty, save for the occasional cat slinking along a fence or the glow of a shopkeeper's light flickering on inside a corner store. The air smelled of salt and fish and damp wood, and the ever-present tang of the ocean was carried on a breeze that cut through layers of clothing and left a chill against the skin. Captain Emma Porter stood at her kitchen window, watching the sea as the first pale light of dawn fought to break through the heavy fog. The sky above was a dull, leaden gray, and the promise of rain hung thick in the air. The salty breeze seeped through the old window panes, carrying the tang of kelp and the sharpness of impending storm. She wrapped her hands around a chipped mug of black coffee, drawing warmth from it as she tried to shake the unease that had settled in her bones overnight, a feeling that had only deepened as the hours crawled toward morning. Her small house, perched on the edge of town like a sentinel, offered a panoramic view of the endless ocean, a view she once found comforting. She had chosen this place for the way it overlooked the water, for the way the sound of the waves had always soothed her after long nights on patrol. But lately, that view felt more like a reminder of everything she'd lost. The ocean was vast and indifferent, hiding its secrets beneath layers of dark water and foam. The kitchen was simple, almost Spartan, worn wooden cabinets that creaked when opened, a battered formica table scarred by years of use, and a fridge covered in faded magnets from police conferences, charity runs, and community picnics. There was a softness to the clutter that spoke of a life lived in service, of someone who had given more to the town than she had kept for herself. She was about to take her first sip of coffee, relishing the familiar bitterness that anchored her to the present, when the radio on the counter crackled to life, loud in the quiet morning. The sudden sound startled her, and a few drops of coffee sloshed over the rim of her mug, dark spots blooming on the worn wood of the windowsill. Unit 12, Unit 12, this is dispatch. We have a 10 to 54 at Cape Falcon. Fisherman reports a possible police vehicle at the base of the cliffs, requesting immediate response. Emma froze. The coffee cup hovered halfway to her lips, forgotten. Her heart slammed in her chest, so hard she could feel its echo in her throat. Cape Falcon, that dangerous stretch of Highway 101 where the cliffs met the sea in a sheer, brutal drop. She'd driven that road 1,000 times, its curves and sharp bends as familiar to her as the lines on her palm. But something about this call, this moment, made her gut twist in a way she couldn't explain. For a heartbeat, the house around her seemed to hold its breath. The quiet became oppressive, as if the very walls were waiting for what came next. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Captain Porter responding. ETA 8 minutes. Her voice was steady, but inside, a storm had begun to rage. She set the mug down carefully, almost tenderly, as though afraid to break the fragile normalcy of the moment. Then she grabbed her jacket, the one she kept by the door for calls like these, and her keys. The coffee steamed on the counter, abandoned. The house fell silent once more, the weight of what was to come settling over it like another layer of fog. As she pulled out of the driveway, tires screeching against the wet pavement, lights flashing, sirens wailing, the radio crackled again. Emma, it's Sam. I'm en route. Chopper's been dispatched. Meet me at the North Lookout. Detective Samuel Duran's voice was tight, clipped. Emma knew that tone. She'd heard it too many times, at crash sites, crime scenes, homes shattered by tragedy. It was the voice of a man bracing for the worst. Copy that, Sam. What are we looking at? Fisherman says it's one of ours. Old model, beat to hell. Dispatch checked records, only one unaccounted for in the last 20 years. Emma's fingers clenched the wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. She didn't need him to say the name. She already knew. Chris, Officer Christopher Lee. Her friend. Her partner once. gone since 1980, the night he went on patrol and never came home. The department had searched, combed the coastline, scoured the forests. The town had whispered, rumors spreading like wildfire through small town streets. But no one had found a trace. Until now. Her mind raced back, unbidden. She could see him as clearly as if he stood before her. Chris's easy smile as he handed her a cup of coffee on a cold morning. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. The sound of his voice, warm and steady in the crackle of the radio late at night. She remembered the teasing way he'd razz her about her cooking. Always offering to bring takeout, always grinning when she insisted on trying a new recipe anyway. The way he'd hum Springsteen under his breath during long patrols, drumming the steering wheel in time to the beat. And she remembered the last time she saw him. Leaning against his cruiser, the setting sun casting his face in gold, his silhouette outlined against the endless sky. His uniform crisp, his badge glinting in the light. "See you tomorrow, Em." But tomorrow never came. The memory hit her like a blow. Her breath came faster as the miles fell away beneath her tires, the town giving way to wild coastline. She knew every turn of this road, every place where the cliffs dared the reckless. She had driven it in search of him once long ago, heart pounding with hope and dread in equal measure. The fog thickened as she neared Cape Falcon. The world narrowed to the slice of highway illuminated by her headlights, the cliffs invisible beyond the guardrail. The roar of the ocean grew louder, filling the silence in the car, rising like the beat of her own heart. A part of her had always known this day would come. The ocean keeps its secrets, but not forever. The Coast Guard chopper appeared on the horizon, a dark silhouette cutting through the dense gray of the morning fog. Its blades sliced the heavy air with relentless rhythm, a mechanical heartbeat that reverberated across the cliffs and over the restless sea. The sound was deafening, filling the void left by the roar of the ocean below. It was a sound Emma would remember forever. The sound that announced the end of hope and the arrival of truth, long buried and unwilling to stay hidden. The helicopter hovered, its downwash kicking up spray from the waves that smashed against the rocks far below. The rescue crew moved with practiced precision, their figures ghostly in the fog. One by one, they descended on cables, vanishing into the mist as if swallowed by it. Emma stood at the edge of the lookout, staring down with eyes that burned but would not weep. The salt wind whipped strands of hair loose from her braid, stinging her face. The ocean beneath was a living thing, churning and seething, as if mourning what had been hidden in its depths for so long. The waves clawed at the base of the cliffs, white foam spreading like the hem of a funeral shroud. The radio on Sam's belt crackled with updates as the crew secured the wreck. From above, the vehicle was barely visible, a dark, crumpled-shaped wedge between jagged rocks, half submerged in seawater and seaweed. It took over an hour to winch the vehicle to safety. The operation felt endless, the minutes stretched thin by tension and the weight of memory. The cables groaned under the strain as the wreck was slowly lifted, inch by agonizing inch. Water gushed from the shattered windows, streaming down in muddy rivulets. Seaweed trailed from the frame, long tendrils that waved in the wind like the hair of a drowned ghost. When at last the 1979 Dodge St. Regis reached solid ground, it hit with a wet, hollow thunk that seemed to echo not just through the cliffs, but through Emma's very bones. The sound was final, like the closing of a coffin lid. Forensics moved in, their dark uniforms stark against the pale fog. Cameras clicked like insects, documenting every angle, every scar on the ruined vehicle. Gloves snapped as evidence kits were opened, the harsh smell of disinfectant mixing with the salt air. Emma stayed back at first, fists clenched at her sides. She felt her pulse in her throat, in her temples, in the tips of her fingers. Her heart pounded, so hard she thought she might be sick, but she held herself steady. The truth was here. She had to face it. License plate confirms it. Officer Lee's unit, a tech reported, his voice low, respectful. The words were a formality. They all knew. Sam appeared at her side, pale, grim. His eyes, usually sharp with focus, were hollow with shared grief. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent offer of support. But Emma shook it off, not out of unkindness, but because this was something she had to do on her own. She stepped closer. The wreck smelled of rust and decay, of salt and secrets. The doors groaned as a tech pried one open. Inside was a tomb. The interior was a ruin of corroded metal, tattered upholstery, and the dark stains of time. The stench of rot and seawater hit them like a wall, thick and suffocating. No sign of Chris. No bones. No trace of the man who had once sat behind that wheel, who had once promised to see her tomorrow. Only emptiness where he should have been. Bloodstains, another tech noted quietly, pointing with a gloved hand. Rear seat. Old. Degraded. Shell casing under the driver's seat. .38 special. Standard issue. Emma stared at the shell casing, at the stains, at the wreck that had once been his patrol car. Every detail burned into her mind, searing itself into memory. She felt as if she were standing at the edge of a grave, not one dug in soil, but one forged by the sea and sealed by time. A gust of wind tore through the cliffs, rattling the wreck, making the battered door swing on its hinges with a low, mournful creak. Chief Douglas Martin arrived, breathless, his usual bluster gone. His face, always ruddy with the flush of authority, was pale as chalk. He stared at the wreck as if he'd seen a ghost. Perhaps he had. God help us, he murmured. After all this time, the words hung in the air, unanswered. Then came the reporters. Like carrion birds, they descended, their cameras rolling, their microphones thrust forward, eager to capture the tragedy, to feed on it. The clicks of their shutters were rapid, relentless, like distant gunfire. Emma drew herself up, forced steel into her spine. She would not let them see her break. Her throat felt raw, scraped by grief, but she found her voice. Officer Christopher Lee served this town with honor, she said, each word clear, steady. We will find the truth. The reporters pressed closer, shouting questions, but Emma heard none of them. Her focus was on the wreck, on the story it told and the questions it raised. The Dodge St. Regis sat on the bluff like a corpse exhumed from a watery grave. The ocean continued to rage below, the cliff standing silent witness to the morning's grim discovery. Emma's mind spun with memories and possibilities. She thought of Chris, of his easy laughter, his fierce sense of duty. She thought of the night he vanished, the endless search, the years of uncertainty. And she thought of what had been found today. Blood where there should have been none, a shell casing where no shot should have been fired, a wreck that should have stayed lost. She stepped closer still, crouched beside the open driver's door. The floor was littered with fragments of glass and rusted metal. The dashboard was a ruin of cracked plastic and salt-eaten wires. She reached out, hesitated, then touched the frame. It was cold, wet, unyielding, but in that moment she felt closer to Chris than she had in 13 years. Sam knelt beside her, silent. The two of them stared into the wreck, into the past, into the questions that demanded answers. Why now? Sam said at last, his voice soft, as if speaking too loud might wake the dead. Emma didn't answer. The ocean roared below, and the fog pressed in, and the wreck gave no reply. That night, Emma sat alone in her small living room, surrounded by shadows that seemed to press in from every corner. The only light came from a single lamp on the end table, its yellow glow too weak to chase the darkness away. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and the ocean's roar echoed in the distance, constant and mournful. On the coffee table in front of her lay the case file she had hidden for years, kept in the bottom drawer of her desk beneath old manuals and forgotten papers. She told herself she wasn't obsessed, that she'd moved on. But the file had always been there, waiting for a night like this. His file. Chris's file. She reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as they traced the edges of the folder, as if by touching it she might conjure him. The pages were worn soft with age and use, corners bent, notes scrawled in the margins from nights long past when she couldn't stop herself from searching for patterns, for clues. One by one, she pulled out the contents, his academy photo, crisp uniform, proud grin, eyes bright with hope. Patrol shots, candid moments frozen in time. Chris laughing with another officer, Chris leaning against his cruiser, Chris at a department barbecue holding a plate piled high with food. The images cut her more deeply than she expected. Then the report of his last shift. The words blurred for a moment, and she blinked hard, forcing herself to focus. His final logbook entry glared up at her like an accusation. Mile marker 58. Routine stop. Highway 101. Routine. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. Nothing about that night had been routine. A memory crashed over her like a wave. A stakeout years ago, she and Chris packed into his cruiser on a freezing night, breath fogging the windows, hands wrapped around cups of bad gas station coffee that steamed in the cold. They'd argued about music, voices low, words muffled by the quiet hum of the radio. Chris had drummed the steering wheel, trying to get her to like Springsteen. "Give the boss a chance, Em," he'd said, grinning at her. "He sounds like he's gargling gravel," she'd shot back, and he'd laughed, that warm, easy sound that filled the car. "You'll come around." She never had. But God, she'd give anything to hear him sing along just one more time. Driven by restlessness, she left the house, the files still spread across the table, and drove the coast highway. The cliffs loomed, black and unforgiving. She parked at mile marker 58. The wind howled, salt stinging her face. The night felt alive with memory. A cruiser's headlights appeared behind her. Deputy Franklin Cole. "Captain, everything okay? I need to talk, Frank. About that night." His easy smile faltered. "It was a long time ago. Not for me." Their eyes met. Guilt flickered in his for just a heartbeat. "Come by tomorrow. We'll talk." But Emma knew. He wouldn't. At the station, long after the sun had set and the town had gone quiet, Sam sifted through the forgotten evidence boxes stacked like tombstones in the back room. Dust coated everything. The air smelled of paper and time, of old coffee and older regrets. His fingers, gloved against the grime, rifled through files and envelopes, photographs curled at the edges, items tagged and bagged and left to be forgotten. Hours passed. The hum of the flickering fluorescent lights was the only sound, a dull, persistent drone that filled the emptiness. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes, but inside, it was as if the station itself held its breath, waiting. Then something. Sam froze, his fingers brushing against a paper softer than the others, fragile with age. He drew it out carefully, as if afraid it might crumble in his hands. It was crumpled, yellowing, edges frayed. He smoothed it gently on the desk under the harsh glare of the lamp. "Emma," he called softly, the weight of the moment clear in his voice. He held up the paper like a relic. She came from the adjoining office, drawn by the tone she recognized, the sound of something found, something important. Her eyes fell on the paper in his hands. It was a statement. Ruth Simmons, park ranger. Her original report spoke of a dark van, headlights off, parked at the side of the road. A traffic stop, a gunshot that shattered the night. But in the official file, a second statement, one that denied it all. A retraction written in careful, frightened words. Emma felt the air shift, as if the ghosts of that night stirred. Without a word, they left the station, the file clutched in Sam's hand, and drove out into the woods. The road narrowed, the trees closing in, their branches clawing at the night sky. The world felt smaller out here, darker, as if the past still lingered in the shadows. Ruth's cabin appeared at last, deep in the trees, a place where time seemed to have stopped. Moss crept up the walls like ivy on a gravestone. The porch sagged under its own weight, boards warped and rotting. A single light glowed behind a faded curtain. Emma knocked. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door creaked open, and Ruth stood there. Her face was lined, etched by years of fear and silence. Her eyes darted past them, as if checking for watchers, as if secrets might be listening. "I saw it," she said at last, her voice a brittle whisper. "Chris stopped a van. I heard the shot. Saw the van take off like the devil was driving. Then Martin and Cole came. Said I'd lose my job, my pension, my home. I didn't know what to do." Emma reached out, her hand steady, voice gentle. "It's all right, Ruth. You're safe now. You don't have to be scared anymore, Ruth. It's over." But they both knew the ghosts wouldn't be laid to rest so easily. The nights that followed were sleepless, consumed by the hunt. Emma and Sam moved through the dark like wraiths, silent and unseen, trailing Martin and Cole as they went about their secret errands. The two men moved like those with heavy burdens, as if the weight of buried sins pressed down on their shoulders, bending them, aging them with every step. Emma and Sam kept their distance, the glow of their headlights doused, their vehicle hidden behind stands of trees or parked along forgotten logging roads. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, the silence broken only by the crackle of dead leaves beneath their boots or the mournful call of an owl. They watched as Martin and Cole navigated logging roads overgrown with brambles, their truck's tires crunching on gravel and fallen branches. The pair stopped at the edge of clearings so old and forgotten that no bird sang there, no insect stirred. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if the trees themselves bore witness to what was done under cover of darkness. Emma gripped the binoculars until her knuckles turned white. She saw the shovels, the crates, the heavy sacks that thudded to the ground with ominous weight. She watched them dig beneath the pale light of the moon, sweat gleaming on their faces even though the night was bitterly cold. Their breath fogged in the air, mingling with the mist that rose from the forest floor like restless spirits. Each night, they followed, recorded, documented. Each night, Emma's fury built like a storm waiting to break. Then came the night at the abandoned mill. The structure loomed against the sky, its roof caved in, its walls leaning as if the weight of years had proven too much. Emma and Sam crouched among the trees, the smell of mold and rust thick in the air. They watched as Cole emerged from a crumbling shed beside the mill. His hands were full, a duffel bag stuffed with bundles of cash that spilled from the broken zipper, vials of chemicals that glinted in the moonlight, and a pistol jammed into his waistband. His movements were quick, furtive, the movements of a man who knew the walls were closing in. And then the worst. Two girls, no older than 16, led out by Cole's hand, their steps hesitant, their eyes wide with terror. Their faces were pale, ghostly in the silver light. One stumbled, and Cole yanked her upright, a snarl on his lips. Emma's breath hitched. Rage coiled in her chest like a living thing, hot and consuming. "It's time," she said, voice low but deadly. "No more waiting. No more watching." Sam nodded, jaw clenched, eyes burning with the same fire. Together, they stepped back into the trees and made the call that would bring the storm. Dawn bled red across the sky, streaking the horizon with fire as if the sun itself bore witness to the reckoning that had come. The morning air was sharp and cold, heavy with anticipation. Sweat descended like a tidal wave, silent at first, a storm building in force and purpose. The team moved with practiced precision. Black-clad figures fanned out, rifles raised, boots thudding against packed dirt. The quiet was shattered as the battering ram struck. Once, twice, and the door of the shed splintered inward with a crash that echoed through the clearing. Shouts filled the air. Commands barked, warnings issued, the chaos of justice in motion. Inside, Cole fired once, the crack of the gunshot splitting the dawn. The shot went high, wild, tearing a hole in the rotted roof. Before he could fire again, Sam was on him, slamming him to the ground. The gun flew from Cole's grip, landing in the dust. Cole hit the ground face down, a snarl curling his lips, defiance in his eyes even as cuffs bit into his wrists. Martin tried to run, slipping through a back door into the clearing beyond. But Emma was faster. Fury lent her strength, clarity sharpened her focus. She tackled him hard, driving him to the ground. "You don't get to run from this," she hissed, her breath ragged, her voice low and deadly. The girls were safe. The drugs seized. The rot that had poisoned the town for so long was at last cut out. The gray walls of the interrogation room seemed to press in from all sides, cold and unyielding. The single bulb overhead flickered once, casting harsh shadows across the table where Martin sat slumped in his chair. His face, once full of bluster and authority, was pale and hollow, his eyes dark pits of exhaustion and defeat. The red light of the recorder blinked steadily, the only sound the faint whir of the tape, as it captured every word, every breath, every crack in his facade. Emma and Sam sat across from him, silent, waiting. The weight of the room was suffocating, thick with the truth that had hovered just out of reach for so long. Martin ran a hand through his graying hair, fingers trembling, his shoulders sagging as if the years of secrets had finally crushed him. Chris wouldn't take the money, he said at last, the words flat, stripped of defiance. His voice echoed slightly in the small room. We had a shipment coming through. Drugs. Big money. I told Cole. We figured we'd offer Chris a cut. Thought he'd look the other way. He paused, swallowing hard, eyes fixed on the table's scarred surface. But Chris wouldn't bend. He threatened to report us. So we ended it. Made it look like an accident. Dumped the car. Figured the ocean would take it. There were no justifications left. No tears, no anger. Just a man who had run out of lies, facing the ruin he had built with his own hands. Chris's remains were recovered where Martin led them. A shallow grave at the edge of a forgotten field, hidden beneath a tangle of brambles and weeds. The ground was soft with rot and time, the earth reluctant to give up its secret. Emma stood nearby as the team worked, the air heavy with the smell of wet soil and fallen leaves. When they uncovered what was left, it was as if the world held its breath. His badge lay near his side, rusted and worn, the numbers barely legible beneath the corrosion. And there, on his skeletal hand, was the ring, his ring, still clinging to him after all these years. C and a forever carved into the band, the letters weathered but still clear. A promise, kept even in death. The town mourned. Flags flew at half-staff. Black bands adorned the badges of those who remembered, and even those who didn't but understood what had been lost. The department rebuilt, the rock cut out at last, new roots planted where the old had withered in darkness. On a quiet morning, Emma stood at the cliffs where it all began. The wind tangled her hair, cold and clean, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. Below, the sea roared, endless and wild, as if rejoicing in the truth finally brought to light. Rest now, Chris, she whispered, her voice steady. We kept our promise. And for the first time in years, the weight in her chest began to lift, carried off on the wind.